Sup, everyone. We are back at it again. Joey D and Timmy B back at it for the Flea Flicker, and it is officially off-season mode on the Flea Flicker. Today we are going to be talking about the NFC South. Joey D, how are you today, my friend?
Oh, we're doing great, Timmy B. It's a great day to talk about football. We've had a great week, and just excited to keep it going. I love the off season. I keep saying this. This is my favorite time of year, except for when the football season actually starts.
Dude, same. Off-season mode is great, especially this year because we've alluded to it. There's only maybe 10 teams or less who actually know who their starting quarterback is. And now after the Carson Wentz trade, pretty safe to say that the Eagles are one of those 10 teams along with the Ravens. And let me tell you, Joe, and I've said this before, it feels good knowing who our quarterback will be next year.
I disagree, Tim. We do not know who our quarterback is going to be.
That is true. That is true.
I will not be shocked at all to see the Eagles draft a QB in the top 5. And, Jalen Hurts just never gets a shot in Philly. I will not be surprised whatsoever to see it. So I don't think we're one of those 10 teams, Tim. I wish.
The Ravens are, and it is great. But enough about our teams, Joe. Today is about the NFC South. So let's hop in to the defending Super Bowl champion, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Currently right now, and these numbers could be off a little bit, but they're right in the middle in terms of cap space. I'm seeing 15th to 16th, so they're right there, right in the middle. So not a ton of room, but they have some room to make some moves. And boy, do they need to make some moves, because I'm looking at just people that they are losing to free agency. Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Gronk, Ndamukong Suh, Fournette, Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin. There are so many players. So, and obviously, I don't think it's a surprise that with Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Bruce Arians, still a solid defense. I mean, Antoine Winfield Jr., fantastic young player in that secondary. So I don't think that they're going to have a Super Bowl hangover where they go 7-9, 8-8, and we're like, whoa. I still think they'll be in a playoff position and maybe they do improve a little bit and win the division this year. But also on the flip side, I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of stayed the same with 9-7, 10-6, and kind of snuck into the wild card. So my question isn't how do they prevent the Super Bowl hangover? I don't think that'll happen. Patriots rarely happened with Tom Brady. But what do they need to do to make sure that they don't have that hangover? So, I mean, Joe, there's so much to do with the Buccaneers. They have so many people that they need to sign. So what do you think the Buccaneers should do?
Well, that's really the kind of the nice thing with the Buccaneers. They don't have many holes on their team if they can re-sign these guys. They don't have to go out and bring in a bunch of free agents like they did last year if they're able to re-sign the guys that they just brought in last year. So if they can do this again with some short 1-year, 2-year deals, I think the players they got to prioritize are Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Levante David, Gronkowski, and Shaq Barrett. If they can bring those guys back, Vita Vea will be healthy and can help kind of offset the Ndamukong Suh loss. That's another position they could draft towards the very end of the first round and in the second round, get some production there as well. So, with the Buccaneers, I really don't think they have a lot that they do need to do outside of just re-signing the guys that you just won a Super Bowl with. And, some of these guys were guys they brought in last year, like Gronk, Antonio Brown. Some guys are guys that, have, been homegrown, raised in Tampa Bay with Chris Godwin, Levante David. These are guys that their whole career has been there, and they deserve another contract there, especially after winning a Super Bowl and contributing and being big parts of that team. So I think that's really got to be their priority. Just bring back the guys that, you're prioritizing, of the free agents that you can bring back. Continue to kind of add depth in the draft. And they've done a really good job of drafting well recently. Between Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr. Those two alone, did such a good job and contributed so much to the Super Bowl team that if they can kind of continue adding players, talented players for their depth and guys who can immediately make a contribution. At the end of the first round, they could be looking at Najee Harris on the board and Leonard Fournette's gone, and you replace Leonard Fournette with Najee Harris. Now you got Najee and Ronald Jones. That's a lethal running back combo right there with Tom Brady, manning the helm. So I think that's really, their main focus is bring back the guys that they just won a Super Bowl with, and then continue to add talent and depth through the draft. So if you deal with injuries or anything crazy, then you have the guys behind them to be able to step up and make some plays while they're out. So I think the Bucs are in good shape. They have the cap space to re-sign the guys that they want to, and they have the ability to make another run just like they did last year.
No, I excuse me. I definitely agree with you. They have the cap space, and they just need to re-sign their players. Like you said, they don't need to go out and get the free agents. They did that last year. So if you can bring back Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Antonio Brown is huge to me. And Chris Godwin said a couple of weeks ago, he was like, "Yeah, like I want to win Super Bowls and not play for money." And I'm like, "Well, when the Bucks offer you 2 for 10, and then another team offers you 4 for 50, you're probably going to choose that 4 for 50 for sure." So I don't know if they're going to re-sign Godwin, but I think Antonio Brown is huge. I mean, we saw his connection and chemistry with Tom Brady, especially in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. So I think that would be a huge re-sign offensively. Defensively, it has to be Shaq Barrett and Levante David. I mean, two outside linebackers, two guys that are huge, get to the quarterback. One of the reasons why they won the Super Bowl, getting pressure on Mahomes. But you nailed it, Joe. With the amount of cap space they have, just re-sign everybody and say, let's run it back. I mean, Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles, Byron Leftwich, they actually have the good coaching in place where they can draft these young guys. And even going back to 2019, they got Devin White, a great linebacker in the first round. So the Buccaneers are doing a great job of drafting early. And even if they don't have Najee Harris, last year they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn out of Vanderbilt. So even Keyshawn Vaughn and Ronald Jones would be a great 1-2 punch, a very young 1-2 punch for the Buccaneers. So I think that's where we go, and I'm glad we agree on that. I mean, it just makes the most sense to me that they just re-sign and they just say, let's run it back. Because looking at the rest of the division, and we'll get to that in a second, Panthers probably not going to shock a lot of people and go 10-6, 11-5, make a run for the division. Falcons, Lord only knows what's happening in Atlanta. That would be quite a turn. And the Saints, well, we'll get to them in just a minute, but this is not a division where you might need to go 12-4, 13-3 to win. You can probably win this at 10-6, 11-5.
Yeah.
So that's my thoughts on the Buccaneers. Any final thoughts or words on the Bucs?
Yeah, I'll say I think it will be a challenge for them to bring back. So they have some decisions to make with these. I mean, like Levante David is a great linebacker. He's been, grown up in Tampa Bay, had his career just kind of go crazy there. And he just won a Super Bowl. But like you said, they did just draft Devin White with a top 10 pick. That to a degree that makes Levante David expendable. And, you don't need to invest a large contract in a linebacker when you have, another linebacker who's younger and cheaper, still playing on his rookie deal. I mean, that's a decision they've got to make there. And then with Shaq Barrett, edge rushers get paid, and he has said he's looking to get.
And he's 29,
paid.
So
Exactly. So he's still got some juice left in that tank. And then you've got both Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown. You need to decide which one of them are you bringing back. If you can't bring back both, so they do have some decisions to make, and it is going to be tough to manage to keep all these guys. But if they can do what they can to, keep most of them, then I think they'll still be in good shape.
Yeah, and hey, it's hard to bet against Tom Brady. So even if they don't, Tom Brady's going to find a way to at least put that team in a position to make the playoffs and then make a deep playoff run. And now, Joe, we're switching to the team that won the division last year, the New Orleans Saints. And, well, they're in a little bit of – actually, let me rephrase that. They're in a lot of deep doo-doo. Currently, I'm seeing they're about negative $60 million in the cap, which is dead last. And the Rams are the next team above them. And the Saints are at negative 60. The Rams are at negative 30. So they're double the team that's right next to them in terms of available cap space. They gambled. They said, hey, this is our time. We have a window. We have this 3-4 year window. Let's go hard. They did not win the Super Bowl. A little bit disappointing.
And they've only got 5 draft picks this year.
5 draft picks, too. That's huge. And obviously, like I'm looking right now, Drew Brees retiring, and I don't know how retirements work with the cap hits, but then you cut him, Janoris Jenkins, maybe like a Emmanuel Sanders. That only frees up like $25 million of the cap space. You're still 35, $40 million in the hole. So Joe, how do the Saints do that this year? What do they need to do?
Well, Pro Football Focus has a lot of potential cuts for the Saints. Linebacker Quan Alexander, they'll save $13 million. Guard Nick Easton, they'll save $6 million. D-line Malcolm Brown, save $5 million. Latavius Murray, they'll save $3 million. Janoris Jenkins, they'll save $10 million. Emmanuel Sanders, you mentioned him. Patrick Robinson, they save $2.5 million. So I mean, they've got a lot of moves that they can make to get under the cap, but this is going to be a completely different team next year. I mean,
Yes.
They're unrestricted free agents that, they probably would like to bring back are Marcus Williams, Jameis Winston, Jared Cook, Alex Anzalone, Trey Hendrickson, who had a really good year. Nobody talks about Trey Hendrickson. I think he had the same amount of sacks as Aaron Donald this year, or the same amount of pressures or something like that. But he's been a great D lineman for the Saints the past couple of years. I think he's going to go somewhere and get paid. Sheldon Rankins, they drafted him. PJ Williams, they drafted him. I mean, they've got this is salary cap hell. Yeah. I mean, they're going to have to get really creative. But I mean, there's been just so many questions about what they're going to do now. I mean, is it going to be Jameis? Is it going to be Taysom Hill? I mean, if Drew Brees isn't there, is Michael Thomas still a stud? Is Alvin Kamara still a stud? If there's no Latavius Murray and it's just Kamara, how effective is he going to be, especially without Drew Brees? The Saints are not really in a very good position to do much at all. I mean, they're not going to be able to sign anybody. They're just going to have to try to get under the cap with what they can. And then they don't have many draft picks. I mean, they have 1 draft pick on day 1, 3 on day 2, and 1 on day 3.
Yeah.
5 draft picks total for a team in this bad shape. I mean, they're going to have to be really creative just to get under the cap. So I don't see how they're going to be able to be creative enough to do that and still field a competitive roster. But I mean, this is still Sean Payton. This is still there's still Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara. There's still Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis, Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, there are still guys who are part of this veteran core who have been there and have that winning culture. But I just don't know what they're going to do at so many different positions. And the biggest one is QB. I mean, you think Jameis is going to be the guy? You think it's going to be Taysom Hill? You think it's going to be someone else? What do you think?
I mean, Jameis is a free agent too. So, I mean, that's another guy that you might have to potentially re-sign. And look at Taysom Hill, according to the cap, is the 4th biggest hit. So, Sean Payton, there's no surprise that Sean Payton does love him some Taysom Hill. But we saw last year when Drew Brees was injured those couple of games, that offense was struggling a little bit with Taysom Hill. And Joe, what the Eagles did beat the Saints with. So Taysom Hill wasn't, I don't want to say that lightning guy that we all thought, but when we saw Taysom Hill, we're like, oh, they're going to take deep shots finally and do this and that. But that offense really, really struggled. And you brought up a great point too. I mean, Kamara is Kamara. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL, if not the best running back in the NFL. And if you take away Latavius Murray, kind of like, and we'll talk about this with the Panthers, that offense was better a little bit more or less when Mike Davis was in instead of Chris McCaffrey, because you don't have to worry about CMC getting it 30, 35 times. Likewise, if it's just Alvin Kamara, he's going to be getting 30, 35 touches a game. So it's a little bit easier to plan defensively. But I think for quarterback, they're probably going to have to draft one. And in their draft position, because they were in the second, third, they made it to the playoffs, they won the division, they're picking 28th. Not going to be too many quarterbacks at 28, Joe. They don't have the capital to make a trade to potentially move up to get one of those falling QBs. So maybe
we're talking like Kellen Mond, Kyle Trask.
Maybe they do take somebody in the second, third round, and they're just like, all right, Taysom Hill's our starter, but like this might be our future. So the Saints are, and the Saints really aren't known for drafting good early. They're very good at getting, second, third, fourth round picks. I mean, Alvin Kamara, Steele. But like
Thomas,
they traded up like 13 picks a couple of years ago to get Marcus Davenport, and everybody was like, that was interesting. So yeah, like Taysom Hill's obviously the starting quarterback at the Saints. I don't think there's any denying that, but to me, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, I still wouldn't be surprised if they do figure out a way to bring Jameis Winston back and have him be their guy because Sean Payton likes him.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's now been in that organization for a year. And I just think he gives you more of a true quarterback than Taysom Hill does. So if they're able to bring him back and still get under the cap, I think that Jameis will be their guy for at least this year. But I do think they're going to have to draft a QB with some upside who's, going to be a, go big or go home type guy. It's going to be, like I said, a Kyle Trask or Kellen Mond. They could end up being good or they could end up being a complete bust. So I think that they're in a tight spot and they have some tough decisions to make.
Yeah, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility because, like you said, with that nice veteran core that they still have, and no offense, Joe, I don't think the NFC East is going to be drastically better than it was this year. I still think we're looking at 8-8, 9-7. So maybe only one team from the NFC East, the NFC North. Probably still just going to be the Packers as of right now. NFC West is tough, so maybe the Saints are thinking like, hey, we got this nice veteran core. We could still probably go like kind of like the Cardinals last year, like 9-7, and maybe get that 6-7 seed and kind of sneak into the playoffs. And then after that, maybe they'll have some more cap space and some more flexibility for 2022 and also, especially with the division of the NFC South. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they might just say like, hey, look, we're good enough to go 8-8, 9-7, make the playoffs. Are we good enough to go 11-5 and win the division? Probably not. So that'll be interesting. I mean, so many questions, and as we get a little bit closer to the draft and all, we'll see what the Saints are doing. Do you think that they might be able to trade somebody? Like I'm seeing, like, do you think they could trade a Michael Thomas or maybe a Cam Jordan, or maybe if they can trade one of these big cap hits to maybe get another draft pick or two? I mean, do you think that's a possibility for the Saints?
I mean, I think it's possible. I mean, if you trade a Michael Thomas or a Cam Jordan to a contender, or, in training camp, if there's an injury or something like that, I think if that's how they assess their team, that we're still a couple years away now, with where we are, and we have to, if they commit to the rebuild, then I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no point in paying Cam Jordan for the next 3 years if you're not going to be good. And then in year 4, when you're good, he's old, or he's leaving. I mean, Michael Thomas, have they extended him already? And I think they did, right? They made him the highest paid receiver.
Yeah, it's like 18.8 cap hit this year.
Yeah,
if they cut him $23 million in cap.
Yeah, I'm concerned for the Saints with Michael Thomas because I just don't know how much his production is going to drop off without Drew Brees there, and I think that's going to be significant. So, if they can figure out a way to trade some of these guys, like I said, if they assess themselves as being a couple of years away, then that helps that creativity and flexibility to get under the cap. But I still don't think they'd be able to get enough to have the assets to then move up into the top half of the draft and get one of the best QBs that are coming out this year to start figuring out their future. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think more realistically, they're going to be bad this year, and they're going to be drafting a lot closer to the top 10 next year and, kind of go for their QB of the future then.
Yeah, and I think it could be a very rude awakening for the Saints where if they struggle this year, maybe they do say, okay, like we really need to blow up ABC, XYZ. We got to trade a couple of these people. But that's it for me on the Saints. Joe, any final words on the Saints on your end?
I think that's all I really got for the Saints. I mean, yeah, they got to add some speed to their receivers. So, maybe a Kadarius Toney out of Florida or a Diami Brown out of North Carolina in the later rounds. These are guys who would make a little bit of sense there. It's going to be interesting. The Saints have so many questions right now, so I'm excited to see what they do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now we're going to the third place team, the Carolina Panthers, who went 5-11, and we have one of our recurring guests, Fab, on. So we are going to cut away to there and enjoy our Panther segment. And we are now joined by returning guest, Mr. Fab, who is a Carolina Panthers fan. Fab, how are you this morning, and are you ready to talk some Panthers football?
I'm good this morning, and I am ready to talk some Panthers football.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, Carolina Panthers 2020 season, they went 5-11. A little bit of a disappointment season, but they had some injuries, some key injuries to Christian McCaffrey. Quarterback Teddy Bridgewater was even injured a little bit, but on the bright side, a very nice young defense. I mean, Jeremy Chin, probably should have won Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was definitely in the top 3. And with a new head coach, Matt Rule, I would say it was a pretty successful season despite the 5-11 record. And you don't want to blame injuries, but very injured here and there. The Panthers could never seem to just get it all together 100%. And good news is, and this might not be an accurate number, but they're still top 10 in cap space. So there is a lot of room to grow this very young team and a lot of flexibility for Matt Rule to make some moves and get the people that he wants. But we'll kick it off to you, Fab, since you are the Panthers fan. You are the expert on your team. You want to quickly summarize the 2020 season as a Panthers fan and then kind of go over some things in the offseason, maybe some things that you would like to see, but then also realistically, what do you actually think will happen?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to summarize the season, it was, I won't say it was disappointing. Obviously, like, you want to see him win, but like you pointed out with the injuries, I mean, just the weirdness surrounding like the whole COVID scenario that they had going on with the league. Like, I didn't have very high expectations. So I was pretty okay with the result. I am not super happy so far with how they've handled free agency, because all it's been is cutting fairly productive players, notably Trey Boston, making us weaker at the defensive back position, which is not great. But, you know, I think it kind of seems to me like the goal is going to be to sort of get younger and then spend a ton of money on a key position. They've been in the conversation as a team that's heavily pursuing Deshaun Watson. And the moves they're making right now kind of seem to indicate that they're not really, there haven't been any like reports of any of the numerous free agents on the team being re-signed anytime soon. So I think what they're really trying to do is just say, how much money can we create? How much capital can we have? And then what are we going to do with it? I think quarterback's definitely a position to address. Defense probably going to be another defense-heavy draft. I would love to see a high pick spent on some O-linemen, or maybe pick somebody up in free agency. But yeah, it's tough to see the light at the end of the tunnel at the moment. It's definitely a team that's in flux, but I have a lot of hope.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned Deshaun Watson. Is that something that you would like to see? And then on the flip side, is that something that you think that, and there have been reports the Panthers would be very interested and they could make a run. Do you actually think that that could happen? And you mentioned it, they're trying to free up cap space. I said they're top 10 right now. So they definitely have the money to, take on his contract should that happen. Do you realistically think that the Panthers could actually make a trade for Deshaun?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it would be a lot more aggressive of a trade than we've seen from them in years. I think it's going to have to be, for how the quarterback market is kind of set for the top end guys. But he is definitely a player that I'd like to see on the team. He's a very solid quarterback, and I know that the offense outside of the O-line is really solid, just in terms of like the receiving talent. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey and Mike Davis is a solid number 2 running back. Like, they have everything pretty much set up for him to succeed. He can move around when the pocket breaks down, as we've seen in Houston, where he was not protected at all and just still had a career year. I mean, I think he can make magic happen. And with what we were able to do with the quarterbacks that we had last year, PJ Walker coming out of, was it the AAF or was he XFL?
Yeah, I think XFL.
I think XFL as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, whichever knockoff league he came out of, I mean, he played very well. And I think as a cultural fit, I think it would be a good spot for him. A place that's not anywhere near as toxic as Houston, and a city that also is like very well loved by the team. Like, he's always been active in his community outreach, and the Panthers are kind of known for that. Between Luke Kuechly, Greg Olson, Thomas Davis, two recent retirements, but Walter Payton Man of the Year candidates and winners, both Olson and Thomas Davis. So I think I think all of the pieces are there for it to be a good fit. I just don't know if they'd actually make the move. But fingers crossed. We'd love to see it.
And another thing too, I mean, Deshaun Watson did go to Clemson, which is right there in the
Hmm.
Charlotte area, in the Carolina area, so that would make sense. And yeah, that's really cool. I think I saw that Greg Olson and Thomas Davis are both signing 1 days to retire as the Panthers. So that's going to be a fun little ceremony and press conference in the next couple of weeks. Now, Joe, coming to you, man, a little quiet. Apologies for that, but Joe, your kind of thoughts on the Panthers? Do you have any questions for Fab? I mean, what are your thoughts about the Carolina Panthers and what they should do in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with what they did this last season. I mean, coming into the season, I really thought they had a chance to be the worst team in the NFL in terms of record. And it's nothing against Carolina. It just seemed like with Matt Rule and his staff as very young, like new to the NFL coaching staff, and then kind of getting rid of a lot of the veteran players that have kind of been part of that Carolina core for a while. And then spending all those draft picks on the defense, I really thought there were going to be some more growing pains. I've never been that high on Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's average QB and average at best. But I mean, I was impressed with the way that he ran the offense, and Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, they both had really good years, as well as Curtis Samuel. And I mean, we don't know how good they could have been if McCaffrey had stayed healthy. But that was one of the things I was most impressed with the Panthers. I mean, McCaffrey goes down, and it seemed like the offense almost got a little bit better and a little bit less predictable because, I mean, instead of feeding the ball to McCaffrey 30 times a game, now, you're spreading the ball around to everybody. I mean, you've got three talented receivers. You got Mike Davis. I was impressed what I saw out of Teddy Bridgewater and, the Panthers team as a whole last year. It does seem like they are seeing a lot of that even more of that core, like you said, Trey Boston. But I mean, getting rid of Quan Short really stood out to me as well. Since I mean, just a couple of years ago, is Quan Short and Star Lotulelei as defensive tackles, and two of the best young D tackles in the league at that time. And now both of them aren't here. Kuechly's not here. Thomas Davis isn't here. It's just a completely different Carolina Panthers team. And it does seem like they are gearing up to make some type of move. And I mean, it makes sense that it would be at the QB position. I mean, we know they were in on the Matt Stafford trade, just didn't have as much capital to offer. I think that they checked on the Carson Wentz trade, but weren't as interested in him, which is fair. But then, so now I think they want Deshaun Watson. I think they're willing to give up a lot and make it happen. I just don't know if the Texans are going to be able to or are going to be willing to, make that trade. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to with the Panthers. Are they going to be able to get Deshaun Watson from the Texans? Or if not, we have assets and cap space to go after another QB if we want to. So that would be my question for you, Fab. If Deshaun Watson doesn't work out, what do you hope they do at the quarterback position? And who do you think that they might end up with when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not going to be Deshaun Watson, which I think we can all acknowledge is a bit of a long shot, even like you said, in terms of like, are the Texans even going to like let him leave? Like,
right.
How mean do they want to be to him? Just like, okay, you want to be on the bench? That's fine. We won't pay you, and we'll still say you're on the team. But yeah, if it's not him, I mean, I know Russell Wilson is kind of being floated as like potentially being traded. I see a lot of talk about him like going to the Bears or something. I wouldn't mind
still
Russell
don't
Wilson
get.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's more of like an internal disagreement. That seems like something that can be worked out in a way that will keep him where he is, rather than Watson, where it's just like not if he's going to leave, but when.
Right.
Yeah, I mean there's not too many other current players or current quarterbacks that are available that I would really think of as like a huge upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater. I know Marcus Mariota is another one that's kind of like being floated around. I've never been too high on him. He's all right, but I think it would kind of be a lateral move if we were going to address it in the draft. I was actually watching a film breakdown of Justin Fields yesterday, and I don't think that the way he plays in terms of like how he will just hang in the pocket and kind of let things develop a little bit more rather than like being more able to run it around as like the first option for the start of the play. I don't think that would work with the way he could be protected in Carolina. I just don't think that until like the O-line is seriously addressed, that a non-mobile quarterback is going to be a good fit. I know what's his name, Zach Wilson, Penn State.
Yeah, BYU.
Oh, BYU, yeah.
Same thing.
It's
Looks
the colors.
like
Yeah, the colors threw me off. Yeah. He's another one that I've seen kind of getting mocked towards the Panthers in current mock drafts. I don't really know much about him. He seems like an all right player, but I don't know. I'm always a little bit wary of drafting quarterbacks. Like, you have to, obviously, because how else are you going to get in the league? But as someone who's not like a skilled evaluator, I couldn't really pinpoint what I like or dislike very much about his game.
I feel that. Yeah, I think the Panthers are going to end up trading up in the NFL draft and get into the top 5 and take one of those 2 QBs. I think it's going to be either Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. I don't think they're, I don't think Trey Lance is as good a fit for their system or Mac Jones, but I do think that Fields or Wilson could have success with that system. And I think you said it best. I mean, Mariota or even like a Sam Darnold, I think that, it's maybe a slight upgrade, but, more like a lateral move at the QB position compared to Teddy Bridgewater. So I think that if Deshaun Watson, is not available and you can't do that anymore, then I think you got to go all in on finding the QB of the future that you like or that your team likes and your team wants. When they do the evaluations and they say, hey, Trevor Lawrence is our number 1, but, he's not going to be there. Zach Wilson is the number 2 guy in this draft and a guy that we really like and think that can be successful. You can't wait on your guy to come to you and hope that they're there. You got to go up and you got to get him and make sure you can. And I think that the Panthers can very well move up into the top 5 and make sure that they get their guy and, give them the best opportunity to, start to continue growing that young team together and, set themselves up for success in a division that I think is going to be getting significantly weaker over the next few years. And the Panthers are one of the youngest team in that division and, have an opportunity here coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're 8 weeks away from the draft, and Fab will bring you back on for our draft preview as we get a little bit closer. We see some free agent signings and some trades and stuff. It's so hard to kind of know who you're drafting right now when there's so many unanswered questions. And the Panthers are in a very interesting situation. It's like, okay, you don't get Deshaun Watson. You still have all that cap space to re-sign players like Mike Davis, your punter, Michael Pilardi, your kicker, Joey Slye, Curtis Samuel is a free agent as well. I'm just seeing free agents on the Panthers. So there's a lot of opportunity to re-sign some players as well. In fact, I don't want to keep you all here all morning. So my final question to you is, and again, this is early March, but what is, I guess, a realistic goal or expectation? Obviously 5-11 last year. You said it wasn't disappointing. I said it wasn't disappointing. Are you thinking, okay, this team can go 10-6, make a run at the playoffs? Or are you thinking, hey, you know what, if we just kind of do what the Cardinals did this year, go 8-8, 9-7, pull off a big upset or two, that's trending in the right direction. So I guess as of right now, kind of what are your expectations? And then what will it take to get back to that 2015, 15-1, going to the Super Bowl? So I guess in short term, long term, what are your expectations for the Panthers?
Yeah, I mean, getting back to the 2015 level is going to be hard. That was definitely like a real, like, we all came together moment. Everybody was at the top of their game. MVP level play from my boy Cam. You're right. It is a very young team. I want to see them develop. I want to see hopefully leaps and bounds, but at the very least, like big steps from all these guys that we drafted on defense last year. It would, I think, be pretty realistic to go 8-8. I would say a winning record would be a solid improvement over last year. I don't think the playoffs are really in the picture as of now, depending on the moves that we make in the next couple months in the draft. That expectation could change, but currently, yeah, I just want to see, a better record, do better in the NFC South. I think the Bucs are probably going to win the division this year, but definitely a realistic shot to be probably the number 2 team in the division. We'll see what the playoff format looks like this year. Maybe we'll be like another one of the wild cards or something. But yeah, as long as it's improving and trending in the right direction, I think that all of the pieces are being assembled, and it's maybe a year or 2 away from really being like a hard hitting, like you don't want to play the Panthers type team, versus now where it's like, yeah, they could, like a freak accident could happen and they beat us. Just in terms of like how it was last year with,
Right.
no CMC, no Teddy Bridgewater for long stretches. So yeah, just get healthy. The players that we do have improve, and whoever we get through free agency and the draft, I just want to see them contribute.
Absolutely, absolutely. Joe, any final words for our guest Fab or anything on the Panthers?
I mean, I guess, are there any free agents that you'd like to see them re-sign? Like, the couple names I see on here, they're like the biggest names to me are Curtis Samuel and Russell Okung. I know y'all's O-line is not great. Russell Okung is, he's okay. So would you like to see them re-sign those guys, or, try to upgrade at those positions?
I would definitely like to see Curtis Samuel come back. I love Curtis Samuel.
Yeah.
He's been great. He's a good like number 3 / like gadget player. Always good. He's got a little bit of like the Robert Woods style of like, oh, this guy can also just like run the ball. Like we can just hand it off to him and he can still like break off a big gain.
Yeah.
He definitely makes the offense a lot more dynamic, I think, when we have him on the field. As far as Russell Okung goes, I mean, I like him as a person. I love his thoughts on Bitcoin, but I don't think he is absolutely necessary to like the continuity of the O-line. I mean, we just got him last year. It's not like he's been with the team forever and like has chemistry with all these guys. I think honestly, like the whole offensive line is kind of expendable at this point. Any position could be upgraded, and I would love to see that. That's something every year, basically, that I say is like, please just like some amount of protection, like even just get like
Yeah.
a blocking tight end, like if they do what the Ravens did a couple years ago with like 3 tight end sets, and like you don't know who's doing what. I mean, we already have Ian Thomas and Chris Manhertz who aren't getting like a ton of receiving work. Like if we got another tight end that was actually like a good receiver who could then be used as just like swap them in and out, like you don't know who's going to do what.
Right.
It's yeah, I think protecting the quarterback has to be a priority. I can understand the strategy they went with last year in terms of like, oh, we're going to get like an entire draft of defense, like kind of fine with that. Defense has been weak, and it has now definitely improved over the last couple of years between, Jeremy Chin, Brian Burns, Derek Brown's doing all right. All these guys are still young, still getting better. Offensive improvement is definitely a goal, but it's none of the guys that we have on the O-line right now really need to be with the team.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. Like PFF doesn't have offensive line listed as your guys' team needs at all. They've got linebacker, tight end, cornerback, and edge rusher, which really surprises me because you would think that that offensive line would be a lot higher up there. I mean, I've always been a firm believer you got to build your team through the trenches. If you have a strong O line, a strong D line, everything else kind of comes together from there and can create success after that. So that does surprise me that Pro Football Focus wouldn't really value offensive line for the Panthers as highly. When I completely agree with what you're saying, they've had trouble protecting QB for years, even when Cam Newton was there. So they've got to get that right for whoever's going to be throwing the ball for them next year.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, Fab, thank you so much for hopping on for the Panthers offseason. I can guarantee we'll have you back on for the draft. We got a long offseason. We got many months until the season starts, so we'll definitely have you on a couple more times to talk about what the Panthers have done, what they will do, a look ahead to the season. So definitely excited to have you back. Excited to have you back today. We're excited to have you back in the future. Any final words from you, Fab, on the Carolina Panthers right now?
Keep pounding.
Keep pounding indeed.
There you go.
All right, Fab. Thank you so much, and you have a great day.
Thanks,
You're
guys.
the man,
Y'all
Fab.
too. Love you.
Oh, Fab.
And that was it with the Panthers. Joe, again, I'll ask you any final words on what the Panthers should be doing or what you expect from them in this offseason?
I mean, I think that Alex Fabregat really said it best. I mean, that man just, he knows his stuff, just like Russell Okung knows his Bitcoin. I'll defer to the expert on the Panthers there and Alex Fabregat and leave it at that.
Absolutely. We're definitely excited to have him back on for draft or for more off-season training camps. So we're definitely excited to have him back on as our little Panthers insider. And now it's time for the last place team, the Atlanta Falcons. Boy, did they have quite a season. Once again, blowing a bunch of leads late in the game. They went 4-12, a little bit disappointing. Dan Quinn, bye-bye. Team actually got a little bit better with Raheem Morris. They were winning a couple of games, which, I mean, once you're 0-5, 0-6, it's pretty easy to at least just win one game. So they went 4-12. They hired Arthur Smith, the Titans offensive coordinator. And looking at the cap, they're in kind of not a similar position with the Saints. I'm seeing negative $15 million right now. So a little bit easier than the Saints to free up some cap space. But they still have a solid core of Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley still on his rookie deal. They've got some, I don't want to say the running game needs a little bit of work, but they still have some good pieces. I mean, Grady Jarrett's great, Dante Fowler, Deion Jones, AJ Terrell they drafted. So they do have some options to be a competitive team, especially with Arthur Smith. But when you're coaching Derrick Henry for the last couple of years, you need to get that running game going. So, Joe, how do the Falcons – bless you again, bless you a third time. You're allergic to the Falcons, Joe. The Falcons just make you sneeze so much. But what are the Falcons going to do this offseason? Because a new head coach, a lot of people are saying maybe they get rid of Matt Ryan. Maybe they just go complete rebuild, make some trades, trade Julio Jones, and just say rookie head coach, rookie QB, all this stuff. So in your eyes, what do you think the Falcons should do?
So I think like you said, they've still got some cap space issues. I mean, I'm seeing they're 28th right now, and they're in the negative, so they've got to get under the cap first. But the way that I see it with the Falcons is they've got to get younger and add talent at a lot of different positions. I mean, You've still got Matt Ryan, and he still can give you some competitive years. But if they do go the route of drafting a quarterback at number 3, then it's or number 4.
Number four.
Yeah. So I mean, if they do choose to do that, that's a position that you're not going to be getting immediate impact from this year. If you draft a quarterback like a Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, you're still probably rolling with Matt Ryan this year, unless you have a trade offer you can't pass up, or like a Teddy Bridgewater injury, and you could Sam Bradford them and get a pretty sweet deal like the Eagles did. But I don't see that really being the Falcons' best path to success. I think that right now, if you can just start getting younger and cheaper and more talented and have more depth across the board, that's what they've got to do. They've got 9 picks in this draft. They've got 1 on day 1, 2 on day 2, and then 6 on day 3. So I think for the Falcons, they've already got, a decent bit of picks. I would say trade down from that number 4 spot, acquire some more picks. Don't draft a QB this season unless you like one of the developmental guys like a Kyle Trask, a Kellen Mond, someone in that mold. And, just start getting talent. I mean, they've got to get some better cornerbacks. They've got to get some better safeties. And they've really got to get some pass rushers. I mean, they've got to go all in on defense this year, kind of like the Panthers did last year. Because, they're losing a lot, too. I mean, Keanu Neal is a free agent. Darqueze Dennard, DeMonte KZ. Those are all free agents. I mean, that's 3 out of 4 if you're starting secondary. And then, Charles Harris, your edge rusher. Dante Fowler could be cut. Ricardo Allen could be cut. There's a lot of help that is needed at those positions on the back end and on the D line for the Falcons. So I think they've got to figure out a way to, just really rejuvenate that position. I mean, they drafted the, who was it? AJ Terrell out of Clemson last year. They drafted him. He was all right. I don't remember hearing a lot about him. So I guess if you're not hearing a DB's name a lot, that's a good thing, unless he's getting torched or making interceptions, but so they've got some I think the Falcons are still a ways away. I mean, I think Arthur Smith is going to be able to help out a lot and bring some new ideas and change to that organization that has been kind of stagnant for a while. But like I said, I think this is a soft rebuild process, and it might end up being a full teardown if they do end up trading Matt Ryan, which is a possibility. I mean, you're not always drafting in the top 5, so you can't guarantee you're going to be drafting that high again next year. I mean, you've got to be able to, if you have the opportunity to get a guy that you love and you think can be elite, then you've got to go ahead and get him and figure everything out from there. It just kind of creates even more questions. So this is another team where I don't know what Arthur Smith and the organization thinks about Matt Ryan as a Falcon for this season and beyond. So I think that's what they've really got to figure out, what they're going to be doing with that number 4 overall pick. What do they want to do? Like, what's their ideal game plan? And then how does free agency and the rest of the draft and everything else kind of shake out from there?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think they really need to address the defense because, and we say this all the time, and I say it too when I see Falcons like +4, I'm like, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst, they have the weapons. So maybe at number 4, they get Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle from Oregon, and say, hey, look, we're investing in our offensive line for our first pick. The next handful of picks that we have are going to be all defensive guys. We're going to get young. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if they do kind of do like a soft rebuild, trade back to number 4, and we'll talk about this come draft time as we know more moves and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they just kept trading back. At 4, maybe you trade back to like 7 or 8, so the Lions or Panthers can get their quarterback in the future. Your couple of guys are still available. Maybe you trade back to 13 or 14. I can definitely see the Falcons maybe trading back multiple times. And like I said earlier, Arthur Smith, Derrick Henry coaching him, maybe they keep trading back and get another Alabama running back, Najee Harris, and just say, boom. And I think that's offensively, offensive line, they could probably use 1 or 2 more guys just for depth and help. I see Alex Mack, the center, as a potential free agent, so that would be somebody I would be looking to re-sign as well. But you got to get that running game. I mean, they signed Todd Gurley last year. He did okay. He did okay. But you got to establish that running game, especially when you have Arthur Smith, whose offense the last couple of years has been give the ball to Derrick Henry and let him run wild. So that's what and like I said, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst. That's a good couple wide receivers and a tight end to throw the football to. So definitely got to establish the run game. And we saw when they went to the Super Bowl, Devontae Freeman was having, scoring TDs. They were doing great. So that's my thing. And then you definitely have to address defense, specifically that secondary. And towards the back half of the first, early second, there are some good options still available. And like I said, we'll get there closer to draft time. And then with that soft rebuild, I wouldn't be surprised. And the name Julio Jones was a potential trade deadline. I could see the Falcons also being a trade deadline team, especially if your quarterback goes down in training camp, or God forbid if somebody has like a Dak Prescott injury, Falcons are like 0-4, 0-5 again. They're like, okay, team A, we'll trade you Matt Ryan because we see you're 3-1, 4-0. Your quarterback just went down. Boom. Ravens, you need a wide receiver. We'll give you Julio Jones. Okay, do that. So I could definitely see the Falcons being a trade deadline team, especially if it goes like last year where they're starting 0-4, 0-5, and maybe that's kind of like that kick in the keister for the front office to be like, all right, this has happened 2 years in a row. We've just blow it up. We got a new head coach. We're not going to fire him this year. Arthur, what do we need to do? What quarterback do you like? Let's start looking and plan for the future. So Falcons have a lot of things to do. I don't think that they're going to be competitive this year. But that's all I really have to say about the Falcons. Joe, any final words or thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons?
I think that's really it, Timmy B. It's Falcons, when they won the Super Bowl or got to the Super Bowl, they had a dominant defense as well. And, it's gotten worse and worse over the past couple of years, and they're supposed to be Dan Quinn's specialty. So they've got to be able to figure that out and, just start getting competitive again. I mean, it really hasn't been that long since they were here. And, one of the premier teams in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So they just kind of got to get back to that. And I think that, this Arthur Smith hire is a step in the right direction. So we'll see what they do this offseason.
Coming from a Mike Vrabel team and how the Titans have been playing the last year, he knows defense can get you to the playoffs and make a deep playoff run, especially if you have a dominant run game, dominant offensive line. And he knows it too. Ryan Tannehill's he's a good quarterback. He's no Mahomes or Rodgers. He's not an elite quarterback. But if you give him Corey Davis, AJ Brown, like Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, give him a nice tight end, a solid running game, and a defense, that's going to be good. So definitely interesting on that, and I agree with you on that. And oh boy, man. One division down, 7 to go, Joe. Next week, we're going to be talking about the AFC South. So we get to talk about the Houston Texans and their offseason. But likewise, if you know anybody who is a fan, or if you a viewer watching this, are a fan of an AFC South team, please let us know. We'll have you on like we did with Fab to talk about what you want your team to do. I know our guy Trent is probably very excited for Carson Wentz being his quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts. So hopefully we can get Trent on. And if you're a Texans fan, I'm sorry, but come on the show. And Joe,
I don't know any Texans fans.
Yeah, Joe, any final words about the NFC South, or looking ahead to the AFC South, or just today overall?
I mean, I think that, the Buccaneers are, this is their division to lose for this season. But I think that, all of, 3 of the 4 teams are, getting up there in the age and not exactly trending in the right direction. But I do think that the Panthers are, a younger, up-and-coming team that, as other teams continue to go down, they're going to continue to improve and eventually overtake that division and, kind of end up running it for the foreseeable future. It's kind of how I see that going over the next couple of years. But for this season, still the Buccaneers, and then I think the Panthers might end up being the second place team in this division.
As of now, Joe, as of right now, I definitely agree with you. I think the Bucs are kind of, not plateauing, but they're, steadily going. Panthers are going up. Saints and Falcons are trending down right now. But yeah, that was a great NFC South. And everybody, we will see you next week for the AFC South. Everybody have a good day. We will see you soon. Peace.
Peace.